2, 1. Today's episode is brought to you by Overwatch Today podcast.
Drop the beat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I'm your host, Blevins, and with me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. How are you?
I am definitely not tired. I'm very energetic and have all the energy in the world. And today's episode is also brought to you by Opposite Day.
It makes two of us.
Yep. So we're basically just going to be yawning at each other for the next, who even knows how long.
Yep.
And we don't even have a ton to talk about. So, what happens, happens. I mean, you guys, the poor viewers who sit through and listen to us every week may have a little bit of reprieve this episode, but who knows? You know, we say that all the time. We always end up being at about the same time. But
yeah, I'm sure we'll go longer than any other episode.
Yeah, this is going to be literally the 4-hour episode. But let's move right into what did we do last week. And before we go into our own specific stories, want to mention that we got the opportunity and privilege to be on the Overwatch Today podcast. Overwatch Today gracious enough to invite both of us to the 100,000 Instagram follower, subscriber, whatever it is, celebration episode over at the Overwatch Today podcast. And for those of you who are regular listeners of our show, know just what a huge role Overwatch Today has played for us with his Instagram and his just, general memeage. Literally has a segment of our show named after him. And it was just really good to actually meet him, and as well as Croak, and contribute to their show. I think, I know I had fun, and I hope, we added something to their show that they don't normally get.
Yeah, definitely appreciate them inviting us on. It was a really good time, like you said. I think it was the first time I've ever sat down and had like a conversation over voice chat with those guys. Yeah. So it was definitely great to, get to meet them. And I honestly, I just thought, I didn't know this, but like I guess him and Croak met, Big Fish and Croak met. Yeah. Just by being mutual fans of the show, and Overwatch Today kind of attracted Croak as a patron of his Instagram page. Yeah. I don't know what the official term there is, like follower or whatever, but he put out and asked for help, and that kind of started the whole relationship between those two. And so it was just, I don't know, I feel like we have a podcast child now.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited I'm really excited to keep track of them and listen to them and watch that show grow. I think they were on like episode 7 or something like that, they said. I've listened to a few of them sparingly, but I haven't caught every one, so I'm not 100% sure what episode they're on. Definitely a quality podcast. Make sure you guys check it out.
Yeah, and if nothing else, we are on one of the episodes.
Yeah, I mean, this past episode at least was their best.
Have to watch. But yeah, no, it was really awesome and humbling to be. They were like, you guys have really affected us, and it's like, wow, you said that and then didn't, want to jump off a cliff. So right. Definitely, all jokes aside, really appreciate being on the show, and it's really just kind of cool to see your, I guess, little mini sphere of influence in the people that actually like the show. So if you guys ever have any sort of, stories or anything about the show in any way, we always love to hear that stuff. It always just melts our heart. But let's go into what we actually individually did. Deathblow, I think you've got a nice little credit card boss story to tell us.
Oh, yeah. Other than like I had a family dinner. My dad had a surgery a couple weeks ago, so he's been recovering. So I got a chance to go hang out with him a little bit this weekend. Mowed the lawn for him since he's not allowed to drive his tractor anymore. And other than that, just had a good time with my brothers. I'm an uncle to like 100 kids or something like that at this point between my two brothers. So it's always a lot of fun when the family gets together. Other than that, last night though, I said, all right, it's the last day for the event. It's time to make sure I get all these awesome skins since I liked all of them. The only one I'd opened was Tracer. So I bought the biggest pack. I bought 50 loot boxes, got nothing. And when I say nothing, a lot of people will say that and not really mean it. I got nothing. The Bastion Legendary was the only one, and I can't even begin to describe to you how little I cared. Wow. So I rolled again and bought a $25 or 25 loot box pack for $20 and got the Diva Legendary, which is a really good one. I have no problems with it, but she is just flooded with good legendaries. It was not high on my priority list.
Yep.
And I just kept opening like Zenyatta duplicates I already had, and just these weren't event related and things like that, And so I went one more time and went in to make it like a cool $100, and ended up pulling the Lucio skin. And then by the end of that entire crap show, I'll say, I ended up with enough gold to buy Genji, Zarya, and basically everything but the soldier. So now I have all the dances, all the skins, except for Soldier on both of those, because his dance is abysmal. It's just terrible. And his skin is just not going to be better than the M16 wielding. I can't ever remember the official name of the skin, but the M16 wielding skin for Soldier is, I think, always going to be my favorite. So I decided to skip that one, but otherwise I'm officially out of gold and out of real life money. And yeah, I'll be eating ramen noodles for a week. Thanks, Blizz.
Woo! Yeah, I until just about now didn't realize the event was over. So
ending today. I think you're still good.
I can't fight the credit card boss as much as I want to. I'm just gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go up, level up 1, and I'm gonna get like 3 legendaries in one box, and it's gonna be awesome. I'm going to get Zarya and Lucio and everything. It's just going to be great. So, but yeah, in terms of what I did last week, really just full trash canned. Haven't really done much of anything. Got some stuff going on, IRL, unexciting, but I've just been kind of like on the DL lately. I do have real life basketball starting soon, which is pretty sweet. And I've been watching, or at least following, the NBA finals, which is sweet. Can't wait to see LeBron James show himself from coming back from a 3-1 deficit to coming back from a 3-0 deficit and still winning. It's going to happen. Of course, if you're listening to this in podcast land, you already know whether that's still a possibility or if it's been quelled. So I'm going to look like an idiot. But, in future, past, present podcast world, I still have a chance. So it is good stuff all around. But let's move right along to what did you guys do last week? And Death, our we'll call not sister podcast but our one
friends.
Of what's that?
Our friends, our older brother, I guess at this point. We started a little before them, but they've inflated like crazy. Obviously, they are just a phenomenal podcast. Really, really high end production value. They're both like, or at least Andres is like an audio guy, so like he is like a wizard when it comes to recording and putting these things together. I know Rob's the one that like works the voice meter software. He was trying to teach me how to use it a while back too, and it was just a nightmare. It's super confusing. I'm an IT guy and I have trouble with it. So they're definitely just a phenomenal show. They cover the strategy of the game, like what you need to do to get better. They dive deep on individual heroes, things like that. So definitely check them out if you're not familiar. I have a feeling most people that listen to Overwatch podcasts are probably pretty familiar with them, but they had a huge interview this week with Scott Mercer, one of the main, I think his title is principal designer of Overwatch. So you've definitely seen him around if you watched the BlizzCon videos, if you watched those as the game was releasing. I'm trying to remember who did. I think it was IGN did that really, really great video series about creating Overwatch from the ashes of Project Titan, and he was all over that. So just a big face that you're used to seeing from the Blizzard camp. So it was a really big interview for them. I talked to Andres about it. I haven't heard it yet because I try to listen to them when I'm driving, as with all podcasts. But I'm going to force it if I can't get in the car for any length of time in the next week or so. I know they were really excited about it, and I just wanted to make sure we pointed it out and drew everybody's attention to it. Make sure you go watch that interview.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to catch up and watch that one because it's just awesome, and it's like they're friends of the show. We've had the host swap, and they've had someone from the Overwatch team on, which means we're just one step closer to getting Jeff Kaplan to acknowledge that you played 1v1 on Kings Row against him when beta.
Yeah, we don't. Jeff, we understand you're really busy and you might not be able to come on the show, but if you could just tweet out at Deathblow and just say, hey, man, we should 1v1 on Kings Row for old time's sake, that would just mean the world to me.
It would just make at least two people's lives.
Right. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, all I ask for is my life to be made. That's it.
Okay.
But yes, let's move right along to my favorite segment of the show.
Overwatch Today Meme of the Week.
Yes, that is the Overwatch Today Meme of the Week. And I got to say it live on the Overwatch Today podcast. So remember, guys, check out the Overwatch Today podcast to get some live Overwatch Today Meme of the Weekage. This week, went back to my roots. We got a Genji I Need Healing meme. So it's a Symmetra looking at one of the recycling receptacles.
The Hollywood spawn door, basically.
The Hollywood spawn door. It's got like those garbage can recycling bins, and then it zooms in on the recycling bin, and it says "I require recycling," and then it zooms in on a part of the bin that's green, and kind of maybe when it's flipped upside down, looks a little bit like Genji, and of course it says "I need healing." So, classic. Actually, Overwatch Today told us about this one before, so I had to pick it when I saw it. I was like, "Oh yes, this is the one he told us about." Yeah. So definitely. I mean, I just always want to see I Need Healing memes. Like, I want it to like go away for a while and then just have it come back in full force.
Yeah, I think 99% of the reason he's still posting them is just your enjoyment levels that you get from him personally. Like the viewership is for the views on them are probably as low as possible at this point. But it's just like three people. One of them's Blevins. The second one is Blevins going back to look at it again so we can laugh at it a second time.
The third one is Prova the Nova.
Yep.
Smart guy. But let's move right along.
It's tournament talk.
We are moving right along to our, of course, weekly Apex update. And we are finally at the second group stage, so only 10,000 more years until Apex Season 3 is over. We really only have 2 matches that have been played. But one of them is a doozy. So we'll start with Group B. In Group B, we saw Luxury Watch Blue beat Conbox S. No real surprise there. Luxury Watch Blue has been at least a contender, not necessarily a top-tier team, but no slouch. And the rest of Group B includes Kongdu Panthera, and Lunatic High, who have not played yet. But Group A is where we start to see... Well, it started off with a little bit of an upset, and by a little bit, we mean an absolute huge upset, at least in our minds. We saw X6 Gaming take out Envious. Now, I want to know what the spread on that match was, because I can't imagine too many people having picked X6 Gaming to win this one.
No, definitely some dollars won on that match for sure.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we talked about this last week, or maybe it was the week before, but it's these teams that make it through the group stages that we're not particularly super familiar with. They're not necessarily a known name, or although I believe we have seen X6 Gaming at least somewhat. Although maybe that's just because we've been talking about the same Apex event for 10 years.
That could be. That could be.
I mean, they're definitely not super notable. But if you can take out an Envious, like, it's kind of crazy. Like, I have to imagine, like, you get somewhat of an advantage because you see Envious play all the time, so you've got a better idea of what their style is. Whereas there might not be a ton of tape on X6 Gaming, so I don't really, if you start to play, either loosey goosey or just play in a weird way that you're good at, like, you can definitely take these teams. Obviously, you can take something off of them. We're not 100% sure what happened here, but Death, what are your kind of your thoughts on Envious, one of the best teams of all time, getting taken out by a relative unknown?
Yeah, I've honestly been kind of waiting for their downfall a little bit. They never really seem to suffer much of a shock from jettisoning Internet Hulk from the roster and replacing him, and he always seemed to me to be, in my head at least, he was like the captain of the team. Mm-hmm. He was the face of the team. He seemed to be what they built around, how they operated around him. Mm-hmm. And they did move him around a little bit, and I don't know, I just kind of felt like they blamed him for not having such a good Winston anymore when they moved him to Lucio, and it didn't really make much sense to me. So I don't know. I've been kind of waiting for the downfall. It certainly didn't happen in the first group stages, but it seems to have caught up with them a little bit here. I didn't see the match to know exactly what happened and what went down, but obviously these teams that are kind of on the bottom end of these brackets and not expected to do so well, I mean, they're coming out of Korea, right? Like, there's no chance these are bad teams. So no. I think we really just kind of have to wait and see, right? Like, was it a one-game outlier, or is this something? Are they going to be out? Are they not going to advance through the second group stages? I think that's going to really answer all of our questions. And they've got a tough group here. Meta Athena and Africa Freaks Blue. We're in my mind, the number 2 and the number 3 teams going into this bracket. Those are the teams they haven't played yet. So it'll be really interesting to see. But if they come out and they're able to deal with Africa Freaks Blue, then I think we can just write it off to they had a bad game, or they just had something X6 couldn't answer. And so I don't know. It's eyebrow raising, but it's not. Nothing's decided yet. So we'll have to take it in stride.
Yeah, I mean, that is the nature of this. 1,000 century event is that we really do. I mean, you're gonna have off days. You can't go through. Well, it's unlikely that you'll go through the whole tournament and never lose, even if you're Envy, especially at this high level. It's one of those things where I really want to see them, go back to NA, like
right.
Like, we saw them do the one time, or they came back for a hot minute. They played against Rogue, lost, but now Rogue kind of, I don't know. I think the Overwatch team dynamic, the organization dynamic, is kind of evening out. Where back in the old days, we would see these completely dominant streaks: Envious, Cloud9, Rogue. All these teams that have like completely dominant runs, 30, 20, 30 games, matches in a row that they just win and never lose. I feel like maybe those days are over. Like, you never see that in professional sports, right? I mean, you sometimes see it in like college, and I guess you see it sometimes in like football, but very rarely, right? Where you see undefeated runs for a whole season.
There's only been one that ended in a Super Bowl championship ever, and it was like before I was born. It was the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
And that was basically it. I mean, we saw the Patriots almost do it and then losing the Super Bowl, one of the greatest moments of my life. But other than that, it does not. You're right. It doesn't really happen too much. And we've talked about this even before, while Rogue and to a lesser extent Meta Athena were kind of making pushes and had a little bit of a streak going. That it's nothing we expect to happen. It's something we're ready for. It wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world. It wouldn't be insanity. But at the same time, it's nothing you can expect. The playing field is definitely leveled out. There's only been 3 teams ever that have done it. It just so happens one of them did it twice, right? It was Envy in their current form did it after release, I want to say. Cloud9 did it for a little while, if memory serves, and then Envy did it in their old form, and yeah, that's really been it for the most part.
I mean, Rogue had a pretty recent Rogue had a pretty good run for a while.
They did,
were like in the 20s, right? 20s or 30.
Yeah, and that's what I think we're going to see it cap out at, is 20 or 30 at the absolute most. I would be surprised to see a win streak get into the 30s again because especially with the way the patches are changing, right? Because when the metagame shifts even a little bit, it can mean a world of difference to a roster, to a metagame. We're seeing heroes that are only kind of tangentially being affected by some of these buffs and changes, seeing huge pick rate swings as they make these changes. So we'll have to wait and see, if there's got to be teams out there sitting there with really good McCree players that are just waiting for patch day at this point, and who knows what's going to happen from there. So
yeah, I mean, it does seem like back in the old days you could be a good team, you could be a cohesive team, and then if anything changed, like you're just so far ahead of the other people because they're not necessarily cohesive teams. So you're like, we're just gonna dominate you because we're better and we're cohesive. Where now it's like the playing field, like the playing field's floor is way higher than it used to be. So like if you take any amount of dip, you just are done. You can't out cohesion people. You might be able to outskill them, but we've said time and time again that outskilling is not like, to an extent, does not matter at the highest of levels because everyone is at that skill, and any dip is just going to hurt you. So yeah, I would be surprised if we even saw 20s again. I would imagine like I just don't see, like, even in like Overwatch League, like I just can't imagine that happening. I feel like, I don't know, what do you even do if that starts to happen in a league? Like, I mean, I guess like the Warriors and Cavs in basketball are kind of like that level of dominant, but they don't even like go undefeated. They just go very long runs without losing, and then they lose because they play 100 games or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say they play so many games undefeated would be pretty much an impossibility at that level of that particular sport. But I mean, honestly, you look at it right now, there's nothing to do about it in a league like that. Like you get to win if you put that roster together and you get that skill cap. I mean, it's literally exactly what the Patriots are doing right now. Like there's nobody outside of Massachusetts that's not sick of them winning, even if you don't hate them or you don't, you know what I mean? I'm obviously an outlier, but if I throw that away, I mean, it's plainly obvious. If I post something on Facebook about a Bills game that's coming up and we're playing against the Patriots, it's I hope you guys win. Like the whole world's behind me, right? Except for the 5 people in Massachusetts that read the post that swear at me. But then there, everybody else is on board. You post something any other week and it's like, hasn't it been like 28 years since you guys made the Super Bowl, or since you guys made the playoffs? And it's like, yep, sure is. But so nobody's with you unless you're against the Patriots. So that's just what it becomes. I mean, you have a dynasty is what it's called, and you just have to play it out because you look at how much money Tom Brady makes compared to the next best quarterback. It's considerably less. He plays at a discount because they're trying to win championships. They're trying to build that legacy, and you get to do that when you have the history of winning to back it up. And with Overwatch, it's going to be a little different than the NFL. Like there's not free agency, there's not those things. You're going to have to see a roster come in, maybe shake up a little bit and just be better than everybody else. And if there's a salary cap, you're going to see players play at a disadvantage. When they lose a 6, you're going to see people take pay cuts to bring in the best possible player to fill in that role. You know what I mean? To try to continue it. And that's when things start to happen, and that's when things go a little crazy. But
so wait, you're saying Tom Brady makes less money than other quarterbacks?
Not all of them, but yeah, I mean, he makes considerably less than most upper level.
He should.
Yes. Yeah, he plays for less money so that they have the cap space to sign other players.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he's a scumbag sent here to ruin my life.
Isn't that like what you would want your quarterback to do? Isn't that like the most noble thing you could do?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the.
So you're saying Tom Brady is noble?
It's the right thing to do.
You're saying.
I'm saying he's committed one noble act that wasn't about him.
We can draw I don't
think he's greedy. I just think he's a cheater. It's really all there is to it. But getting off the topic that we don't need to be on because it'll just get me all flustered for no reason.
Well, I mean, you did say it was noble, so I don't know why you would get mad about it, but.
I'm mad about it.
This is the one where Deadpool literally just kills himself on the camera. Um, we have now officially talked more about football and basketball than Overwatch this episode.
That's true.
That's
But yeah, I think that the days of the win streaks are likely gone, but the league is where you'll see it if you see it again. And I don't expect it to be right away. Like, it's going to take some time. You're going to have to build up depth on the roster beyond your initial 6. And, that's where it's going to really come from is that they have enough players where they're able to survive, people leaving or roster moves or free agency or whatever happens to them, and then they're able to continue it. It's not going to be a group of 6 that's dominant anymore. It's going to be an organization that institutionally is better built than the rest of them in order to take things over. So it's a big maybe if it ever happens again. But I think the league is an environment where it's certainly possible.
Yeah, and I really do hope they keep the league open and relatively fluid, even though, like, logistically, from, like, the players' perspective and the organization's perspective, like, trading people, cutting people, releasing them, all that good stuff, like free agency, that's, like, very messy from, like, a, personnel standpoint. But, like, from a viewer standpoint, like, I love the trades and stuff. Like, everyone loves talking about trades and free agents and all that good stuff. And everyone wants it to happen as if it's just like instantaneous and easy to do, but it's obviously not. I do hope that they at least keep it open for that to be a possibility. I don't want to see like locked rosters forever or whatever. Like I would much rather see trades and whatnot.
Yeah, free agency is a lot of fun. It creates an awesome element in the off season and things like that. Like it creates a really fun thing to watch and track, as the league's not actually playing its games. So I definitely think it would be a very important and crucial thing for them to do to get the league right.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just make fantasy Overwatch so much more fun. But yeah, so even though we spent most of this segment talking about Apex, there's literally only 2 matches played. But let's move on to the Overwatch EU contenders. We got the top 16 out of that. We got E United, Vivi's Adventure, Bazooka Puppies, Team Singularity Ninjas, Movie Star Riders, 123 Misfits, Laser Kittens, Esporati. I feel like I swore in Italian. Cyclowns, Esports Cyber Athletes, Team Expert, Alpha Squad, Gamers Origin, Ninjas in Pajamas, and Ninjas with Attitude. Why are there so many ninjas in EU? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely plenty of them. I even grouped them up at the end just so it would be awkward to read.
Yeah.
Because I got your back, friend.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the notable thing about this list, other than the plethora of ninja-based team names, is just kind of we looked at the NA qualifier bracket, and it was just packed. known team. It is super stacked, and this
one
really
unknown
not.
team was made from known players.
But yeah, I mean, really, all that EU was able to do to me was fill out a really quality first day. And after those teams qualified, the quality of the participants here at the end definitely dipped. Not to say that these guys aren't up and comers or anything like that. They definitely played well. But it's just, you want to see the known quantities, right? Like, no, I don't get excited about developmental league players playing. I get excited about the big guys going, and it's not going to be a problem down the line for contenders because the big teams will all have league spots and they'll be doing that. But so I don't know. It was just a little weird, I think, to see, but it makes sense, right? Because the entirety of the EU scene has basically moved to North America, and they all played in our side of the bracket. So this is really what's left. And I think another telling thing here was that when you look at the first day's brackets, one of the teams we would have all picked to have been shoo-ins, Ninjas in Pajamas didn't make it on the first day. They needed that second day to get in there and manage to qualify, and they didn't even do well after they qualified. No. They lost right away to Gamers Origins. So there's a lot to take from this event, even though a lot of these names are names you're not familiar with. There's also a lot of single instances where, players we've seen before have popped up with new rosters. So it's going to be really exciting to see if they found a home where it can work, and I think that's really the beauty of this tournament, especially going forward once the teams and the biggest names are all on established league teams. I think this will make things a lot more interesting going forward to see it play out like that from the beginning, right? And But yeah, I don't know. So there's a lot of interesting, rosters here and a lot of unknowns. So there was definitely a lot of work to do. I didn't get to watch the second day, unfortunately, because of my family event yesterday. But it was the first day was definitely a whole lot of fun, and really kind of eye raising. I don't know. I'm excited to see this bracket play out, even if I wasn't excited to see it get qualified. I'm definitely excited to see the EU bracket play out because there's a lot of unknowns here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the EU scene plays so infrequently that
Yeah.
there's drastic changes in performance from these teams, and we don't get to see it. So it's shocking to come out and see some of these teams struggle that are known quantities, and lose to teams we're not familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost seemed like there's been two routes that organizations and teams can take. They can either go on the back burner, be like what Splice did. You know what? We're invested in Overwatch. We're keeping a very close eye on Overwatch. Our finger is on the pulse of the Overwatch esports scene. But like now, it's not the time, so we're backing out. The players don't really have that luxury because every second you miss, you're getting behind. But and then we've seen teams, like CLG, like Team Liquid, even Immortals, Rogue, these teams that are like, we're at the top, or at least in the like upper tiers. We're just gonna push for it. We're gonna keep it going. We're gonna get our spot. We're gonna make our name here. I don't necessarily fault any organization for doing one over the other. It's just interesting to see that those are the two routes that we've seen. I think it's also interesting to think about like what Contenders means now and what Contenders might mean. It didn't really play out like this in NA, like you said, because it was pretty star-studded bracket. But for EU, it's like, we've got the Ninjas in Pajamas, Misfits, Movie Star Riders is not an unknown quantity. United as well, obviously, but like most of the other teams, relatively unknown. So if you are a pro player or pro caliber player, do you try to jump on the bandwagon with an established team and qualify there? Or do you get your group of buddies and just try to make a name for yourself? It's going to be interesting to see like what Contenders actually does. Like, is it a place for scouts to look for players, or is it a place for organizations to look for teams, or for teams to get spots in the league? Like, I think that, like, depending on what it actually is, can drastically change how these tournaments go moving forward, right? Because if you're like a player that's looking to make a name for themselves specifically and get picked up by an existing league team, you might not want to be on a team with a bunch of other top tier players that might outshine you. You might want to make sure that you are absolutely the number one player on the team and that you can outplay your team's shortcomings. It's just kind of interesting to think like it could almost turn into like, I don't know, a very weird form of Overwatch depending on like what Contenders actually feeds into and how it feeds into it.
Yeah, and it's all kind of shrouded in the mystery of the league, right?
Right. We have no idea. I'm just completely making this up.
Yeah, we'll figure it out at some point once we know exactly how everything's going to be structured. But in the meantime, we're just left to speculate wildly and guess, which is fun in its own right. So we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely interesting, and like you said, like, Ninjas in Pajamas just didn't do well. Like, what have they been up to, man? Like, they just seem like the team that's like, okay, well, we have this organization and we have a team and we were once on top, and then not at all.
Yeah, it's definitely surprising. They also did have our good buddy Linkser on the roster there,
Yes.
formerly of Creation Esports, who we were good friends with. And, so it was really interesting to see them play with him. I think he adds an element that they didn't have previously. Like now he's got that Yeah, he's really good Widow. He's a really good Genji player, and it's just not anything I really remember seeing from them before. And they kind of struggled to move into a dive comp. If maybe they just didn't want to, and they had the players all along, but they seem to be trying it now that they do have that Genji player on the roster. So I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how they continue going forward. But and we talked last week about how they didn't do great in Take TV, and we weren't sure. We talked about how sometimes being innovators, how sometimes innovators fall flat on their face, because that's what comes from trying different things and doing weird stuff.
Yep.
Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it's spectacular in the wrong direction. But this is really 3 events now where, I mean, nothing against Gamers Origin, but I would have expected Ninjas in Pajamas to beat them. So I'm going to call that second day, despite qualifying and doing the bare minimum, I'm going to call that day a failure because they lost to Gamers Origins, and that's not something we should expect. They lost to 1-2-3 on the first day of the bracket, so they weren't able to get in there. And again, it sounds like I'm really bashing these teams that did make it, but it's just a matter of, I mean, you have these preconceived notions going into the tournament, and they're never worth very much. Obviously, you can see at the end of it, but they just weren't really able to get things done in the quality that we'd expect. Looking at the 1-2-3 roster, I mean, tell me any of these names that you recognize. Mistakes,
Nope.
Tonic,
Nope.
Kodak,
Nope.
Bach,
Nope.
Snillo,
Nope.
Dania.
Nope.
All right, so 0 for 6 on names we're familiar with, and that doesn't mean anything. I mean, they're currently slotted at ranked 37 in Europe, so a team they should beat. Clearly, I think Movistar Riders didn't have that problem. They 2-0'd them, and was able to advance through the bracket when they faced them. So we should be expecting to see. I mean, going into the event, I would have put Movistar Riders and Ninjas in Pajamas close, considering the recent Ninjas problems. But if you go back a month from there, I would have thought Ninjas in Pajamas was at the top tier with the United, just right there, and for the EU teams, ready to take out any event that came along and ready to compete in it. And they just don't look like that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those things with the organization where, like, they probably have team changes that need to happen, and as an organization you're like, yeah, really no reason to spend time, money, effort, energy, etc. on shifting around a team when we're going to have to either restructure or pick a new team or do whatever the league calls for. Obviously they have at least more advanced information than we do, but I would imagine that there's a point where if you're doing poorly as a sponsored team, but you don't want to drop your core, you want them to keep playing, like, you just let them flounder, which is unfortunate, I guess, for the players. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast. But we have seen a lot of teams do a variety of different things, so we can't really, like, if we saw every team like, nope, we're never making any organizational changes, every team stays exactly the same no matter what, we might be given reason to believe that they get nothing from changing the team. But we have seen a lot of moves around, and we'll actually talk. Well, we'll talk about some moves, some of them voluntary and some of them not. But we'll talk about it in our next segment.
Oh, let's break it down.
Where we break it down. Rise Nation parts with the roster, and they have no plans for a new one. Like I said a few minutes ago, some organizations just don't want to bite the bullet right now. Like, I honestly, knowing the very little I do, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to pick up a new roster right now. It's just so up in the air.
Yeah, there's no guarantees about what happens to you if you don't get a league spot, and that makes things really risky. It makes it hard for teams to want to spend any money in the game. And like you said, it's impossible to blame them for it. It's just unfortunate to see. They didn't close the door on it. They just said they currently don't have any plans, so they're taking a leave of absence from Overwatch. I would be surprised to see the big organizations not come back in some capacity once the D League has been sorted out and once the unaffiliated tournaments start to pan out and take place, and we see the schedule form, I would be very surprised to see almost all of them not end up in the game in the long run. But for the time being, there won't be a Rise Nation to discuss.
Yeah. It's the same, pretty much the same instance as Splice, where you probably just don't gain enough from being a top tier, or like you don't gain enough from being a mid-tier team, so you just part ways now and try to rebuild from scratch once league starts. I understand it completely. Next piece of news, we had Internet Hulk joins Team Liquid as coach. This is an interesting one. Team Liquid is one of those teams that has been slowly but surely building out their team, and building out the organization and really kind of putting more of a focus on Overwatch. Although they were one of the teams that early on that seemed like they switched their roster every other tournament, if not more. But now they've kind of have at least a solidified base. And now with Internet Hulk as a coach, like that just, he's got to be, looking at it, he's got to be one of the premier coaches in the world right now, right? How many people in the world do you want to have coach your team over Internet Hulk right now?
It would be a small list, and most of them that would be over him would probably be active players that I would be pulling off rosters to take
how many
down
available how many available people? It's got to be zero, right?
Pretty close to it now. I can't come up with anybody off the top of my head. I can really only think of like Rafflegator's the one that comes to mind, and I don't know where he has been lately, but he's definitely been a part of the coaching scene back in beta and early on after release. So
he might have been the first Overwatch coach.
Definitely the first one that like I saw show up at a LAN and want to like coach his team in between games and stuff like that. To really kind of the one that tried to claim the official coaching spot that you see in some other esports. It'll be interesting to see if he comes back. He could honestly be very, I mean, he's never been a very vocal coach when he's been there. You don't hear a lot from him. But so he could very well be tied to a team right now coaching them. And I'm just ignorant of that fact, but I don't believe so at the moment. So he's the one that comes to mind that I might want to interview over Internet Hulk. But yeah, Internet Hulk is a big name there.
Yeah.
Who I personally would just rather see playing again, though.
Yeah. We just got this in from one of our patrons, A. Smith, who said Rafflegator just signed with Tempo Storm.
Oh, okay.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice to see Tempo making some moves, too.
Picked up, it was Too Easy not too long ago, right? So made some roster moves, now picking up a coach. And it'll be interesting to see where they go. I believe they are qualified here, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't remember. I don't have the NA qualifiers in front of me to know if they got in there.
Did, but we can check that out on your own. I'm gonna jump over this next one because we'll talk about that at the end because I think that's a more extended conversation. But like we mentioned before, Linkser is now on Ninjas in Pajamas. Already kind of talked about that.
Don't know that it's an official signing or anything. Like he's just playing with them, and honestly, like I said, it gives them a new element. So I would expect that to stick. I think it increases their potential quite a bit as a roster. So hopefully it sticks because Linkser definitely needs a home with a good squad.
Yep. We've seen over this is really a long time conversation that's been a long time coming. Misfits. After the big trade, really just kind of fell off, man. Like, what's going on? My boys.
Yeah, and it's hard to see their struggles, too, when you look at the bracket, right? Because on day one, they made it into the finals, and that was the star-studded bracket. That had Movistar Riders, Laser Kittens, that had Vivi's Adventure, E-United, all those teams. Yep. But when you watch it, it was really telling to me when I watched them beat Movistar Riders that it was just why am I blanking on his name at the moment? Toxic, I think I want to say his name was. No, it was the Tracer for Movistar Riders.
Oh, okay.
And he just kind of seemed to have the better of Tavik in a lot of scenarios in the Tracer versus Tracer battle, which is really, really important in the dive comp that we've been seeing lately. Yeah. So it was just really, really interesting. He also didn't really hang with Valutaja in that matchup either against United. They went down 2-0 in that matchup. And they just seemed to be struggling to finish out and to close. And it's not that there's a problem for most of the time, but they just aren't quite there and they aren't quite together. There's a lot of times, and it's easy to watch the tape and blame Reinforce for this, but I don't. There was a lot of times when it just seems like he's finally getting there and the fight's over already. Like there's 2 picks down, so then you just have this Winston that jumps onto the payload and just kind of stalls a little bit and feeds a bunch of ults to him. Yep. But at the same time, do you completely give up like 0.2 on Gibraltar? Because that's a really important one to hold for as long as you possibly can, especially with the spawn advantage the way it is. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see them going forward. I thought they did make some steps and some strides. They 2-0'd Laser Kittens. They 2-1 Movistar Riders. Those are matchups they should win. But they should have been competitive against E United, and they weren't. It was ugly. And I think they've got a lot of work to do. They've got to figure things out. And it might just be as simple as there needs to be a steady stream of competitive Overwatch so that they're back to, practicing at full bore all the time. I know my team took like a week off because we finished a tournament and we played 3 rounds in Contenders. Like, great. So we had to take a week off because we did a lot of prep going into it and things like that. And so, somebody was without a PC for a while, but once it became like, well, do we get a sub for multiple days or do we just take a break? And we were like, I'll just take a break. So when there's nothing to prepare for, it's easy to slack off a little bit. And I wonder if that's what's happening with them. But at the same time, I mean, it's hard not to judge them, right? Like the same way it's hard not to give Rogue all the credit in the world for what happened with that trade because of how good it went for them. It's hard not to blame the other 2 teams. Like, what were they thinking? It didn't make sense to me at the time. We knew somebody was going to come out of it ahead because there's no way you change up rosters like that without one team considerably getting an advantage. But LG Loyal is gone. They were the other team that was involved in this. And Misfits is struggling and just starting to get back into the swing of things, and hopefully they can continue to do that. But definitely going to be curious to see going forward what they're able to do. I'm excited to watch them play out. I need to see them make a stand against E United and win a match against them for me to really be convinced, because I mean they were winning every LAN event. Everything that happened was Misfits, if it was in LAN for a while there, and they're not playing on that level right now. So
yeah, I mean, Ryan Force has said himself that he's like a strict Reinhardt player, so I would imagine he's probably not at full capacity, playing Winston. And the Winston is a pretty important piece. I mean, your tank is always a pretty important piece. So when your tank is not playing at their full capacity, like I mentioned before, like any dips at this level are just so punishing. You just get punished so bad. So it'll be interesting to see if, maybe Reinhardt comes back, if maybe, even though they have that great team dynamic and they've been together for a while, like if maybe, swapping out Reinforce might make sense for them. But again, I imagine that there's, going from being like a high middle tier to like maybe a little bit higher tier team, like probably not worth putting that much effort into, at least not at this point in the game. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm hoping they come back because obviously I want to see the Plupster do well, but we'll see. I know, Death, you want to talk a little bit about this E United player that is a really good Zenyatta named Boombox.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to him. Basically, we don't have to go too in depth on it or anything like that, but he was kind of a new addition to the E United roster, not somebody I was used to seeing them play with. And he was just he had a standout performance from the team that won the event. I mean, he was the standout player to my mind and by my eye, and even the casters shouted him out all the time. He was playing really, really well on the Zenyatta, really helped the United with their dive comp. It helps when you've got DPS players like Valutaja and Tracer and things like that, just carving everybody up. But he was very present on the kill feed. A lot of really good right-click plays, and the right clicks are really what set Zenyatta's apart, other than just pure aim. It's the timing and the execution of the right clicks is really important. So, yeah, I thought it was just somebody that was definitely worth checking out. And like we talked about, we don't know exactly how teams and future rosters are going to use the Contenders tournament, but I think at a bare minimum, Boombox should be considered. I mean, if he's willing to make the move over to the NA side of things, I think teams have to have their their ears perked up and paying attention to what's going on with Boombox, and I would personally make an effort to sign him because I think he's one of those players, because he's new, you can probably get him at a discount. So if you're like spending money elsewhere on your roster, then he's somebody you could bring in and get a top level play. We talked about
really good
DPS players you could get at a discount like Jesus and stuff like that in the past. And I think he was a player that on support really stood out in this tournament. Bonnie as well from the NA side was another one. I can't remember why am I blanking on where he played from? But it was another Zenyatta player. So I think it's really curious to see as the meta shifts to the Zen Lucio more than the Ana Lucio. It's great to see kind of new players come up and take these roles and stand out and shine, and just leads to more questions about how many roster spots are these teams going to be able to hold for tournaments, in the league and stuff like that, because things could get really, really fun and really interesting if they're allowed to hold 9 players or something.
I think that would just be awesome, but that's just me. So another thing we got actually right when we started recording again from A Smith was that at E3 on the 15th, so today in podcast world, on Wednesday for people listening live, we're going to have a USA versus Canada show match at E3 on the 15th. Should be awesome.
And the rosters are not public yet, so they're announced at E3 and then instantly on stage play 4 matches against the other team.
That's awesome.
So that'll be a lot of fun. It kind of I didn't expect Overwatch anything to be going on at E3, so it's great to see they found a way to sneak something in there, give us something to watch, and kind of middle of the week, hype build up here for the event coming in about 5 months now.
Yeah. I'm super excited. So we'll definitely talk about that next week. But the last thing we kind of wanted to talk about, we did talk a little bit about, actually a pretty decent amount about, on the Overwatch Today podcast. And it has to do with Dafran from Selfless. Death, do you want to kind of key us in on that whole story?
Sure. So Dafran has been suspended effective immediately from the Selfless roster. He's not going to be participating in any events under the Selfless name. He has been disqualified from Contenders Season 0, Contenders Season 1. It is a huge slap on the wrist here for Dafran. Everybody, my first thought when I heard the punishment was, he was clearly hacking, right? But no, he wasn't. This was purely like a community move, right? He wasn't in a tournament. He wasn't playing with his team. He was solo queuing on ladder and on stream. That's, I think, the most important thing, is that he was on stream while he was doing it. He had Overwatch open in the background. He would pick Torbjorn on every map. He would build a turret, and he would jump off a cliff, and then he'd alt-tab to play some weird hentai game that I see people playing from time to time that I don't understand. So he was actively throwing and doing that from the number 1 spot on the ladder. These are like his colleagues essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because most of the top of the ladder is esports pros and things like that, playing in their spare time and streaming. And so it was just kind of spitting in their face, didn't care, and was just trying to lose. Clearly against terms of service. I've seen Twitch clips of him saying I'm throwing, I'm trying to lose. I have no interest in winning. I've won 2 in a row and it's pissing me off. I don't want to be doing this.
Yeah.
And they decided that that's enough, that his behavior was unacceptable. Selfless agreed, and he is basically, I would assume, done with Selfless forever. That's not what the press release said, but we've talked about it time and time again about how Selfless revolves around Dafran. Their success, when I watch them play, when Dafran is dove on and killed early, is low. When he lives, when they peel for him, or when he's not the target, it's high. I don't necessarily think he was carrying them. I think the play style of the team was to keep him alive and to support him in his role on Hitscan and let him take the game over. And they were a very consistent, top-performing team in the NA scene. And when it's your linchpin that goes down, and when you lose him, that's gonna drastically affect their performance. I don't know of anybody that can come in and quickly fill in. Off the top of my head, I don't know of any huge hit scans out there that are just waiting to find a home that can slide right in there. But hopefully they're able to find somebody, as we definitely still want to see the rest of the roster compete. It'll be a fun storyline, I think, to watch them kind of recover from it. But I feel really bad for the rest of those 5 guys who did nothing to earn this penalty. That is really affecting them just as much, if not more, than Dafran. Although, I mean, it's going to be hard to justify a league spot on somebody that is potentially not going to be eligible to play right away. I mean, this hurt Dafran the most, obviously, but there's innocent victims here. You know, there's just bystanders that were like, hey, my whole team, like, what just happened? Like, we're going to be bad now. And that's really unfortunate. So, I don't know, very surprising. But what did you think about Blizzard making a stand this severe of a punishment for something that was not hacking based or not, you know, in tournament play? Did that shock you at all? Or
you know, at first I thought it did, because on the one hand, like, you paid for the game, you know, it's your game, you can do whatever you want with your game, like, as long as you're not hurting people or harassing them or, you know, doing, I mean, in a way this is kind of harassing, so it's like the freedom to do what you want with your game on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, this was just bad. There's nothing good about this whatsoever. It's like, not like I said on the Overwatch Today podcast, it's like, if you had a stance against Blizzard, for whatever reason, or if you had a stance against, like, the competitive ranked mode, or like if Dafran was trying to make a point, there are much better ways and more constructive ways to do it than what he did. What he did was unacceptable. It, like you said, it punished a lot of innocent people, not just the people on his teams from his punishment, but the people, like, who he's playing with. Like, he ruined 11 people's days, or I guess at least 5 people. The other 6 on the other team are probably kind of happy to just get the free win at that high ELO. But, you know, there's nothing good. No one benefits from what he did. It's a terrible, especially since he's streaming and he was the top player, and he's a top player. He's a role model, like, whether he wants to be or not. If you're a public facing player and you're at that high level, like, you are a role model. You are representing Overwatch and Blizzard, whether you're, you know, partnered with them or being paid by them or whatnot. Like, as a streamer with, you know, I'm assuming thousands of viewers, hundreds if not thousands of viewers, and you know, that level of skill playing the game in a public venue, like, you are an extension of Blizzard, and I would imagine, like, if a Blizzard employee did something like this, they'd probably be fired.
You're an ambassador for multiple things in that scenario. When you're Dafran, you're an ambassador for Blizzard, you're an ambassador for Selfless, you're an ambassador for the game as a whole when you stream on Twitch, and you need to represent all 3 well. This was a clear violation of terms of service. And just, I think, and to clarify the punishment here as well, he's not able to compete in the competitive season this season. I don't know about next season, but I think he's out there as well. And this is not just his main account. This is all of his alts as well. So we all got 4 spots closer to top 500 when this happened, because that's how many accounts he was higher ranked than all of us on at this point. So, yeah, I don't know. It's an unfortunate scenario, but at the same time, this had to happen to somebody. Okay, and I'm not going to say, so I'm glad it was him or anything like it, because there's no being glad it happened to anybody unless there's somebody you don't like, and that wasn't Dafran. I had no ill will towards him at all. But I'm glad it happened at all to somebody, like, just taking out the individual, because it now sets the stage. Like, you guys need to understand, like, and this, I feel like every game has to go through this as it gets its new crop of professional players that aren't used to being professionals and acting professional, that you have to, at all times, right? Like, if you're logged in on an account that you've ever streamed from, if there's anybody out there that knows the name of that account, you have to be on your best behavior. When I'm logged in and playing on my Deathblow account, okay, I don't BM. I don't yell at people. I don't call them lucky. And the only reason is because I'm an ambassador for this show. And when I'm doing this show, I'm an ambassador for Blizzard and all these other things. And what we say, we can give our opinions, but we have to a certain extent, promote the game. I mean, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't want to be doing that. But that's so, yeah, I don't attack people when I'm playing from this account. I've been recognized playing. Are you Deathblow from the High Noon podcast? Like, it's happened to me multiple times. And I don't want that to be after I told somebody, I swore at somebody and told them off, and, you know, all these things, because it makes everybody involved look bad. Like, nobody gets any benefit from that. I do have an account out there that I'll never say the name of on stream, because if I want, to be a jerk, I want to be a jerk, you know. But it is what it is. I don't know.
Yeah,
you have to constantly be aware.
Yeah, I think it sets a precedent, and like Overwatch and Blizzard so much about community, so they needed to set a strong precedent for how the community needs to be addressed and treated, and it's with respect for everyone, not just yourself. So I like that. The one thing I do want to note, and that I'll wrap up on, is what I don't want to see, and what I think could potentially be misconstrued here is, like, I don't want Blizzard to be like, oh, well, you did something we don't like. You spoke ill of Blizzard. You did this. We don't agree with this necessarily. And then just start banning people for stuff like that. I don't necessarily even have a good example in my head, but I don't want it to be like, oh, well, Blizzard doesn't agree with what I'm doing, so they're gonna ban me. That I think is bad. I think I think Blizzard and Selfless both made the right choice here, because the community is so important to the game. Like, the game does not exist without the community. Like, it was built on its community. It's grown to the massive success that it is because of the community, both esports and otherwise. But I don't want to see Blizzard just throwing the ban hammer on people playing the game and having fun, even if that level of fun isn't necessarily what other people agree with. So I don't think that they're going to do that. I just don't want that to happen. But overall, I think it was a good move. It needed to happen, and I agree with you, Death. I'm glad it did happen. Not specifically to Dafran. Again, I don't have anything against him, but I think I do want this type of behavior deterred in whatever way possible.
The only thing positive I'll say about it is better to happen now than after he's on an Overwatch League roster and there's a fan base who's bought the Fran jerseys and all these things. Like right now, I would love an esport, like an Overwatch esports jersey, but I'm just holding tight because who knows what the names are going to be, if the redesign of the logo or whatever's going to happen when they sign the league or get their league spot or whatever's going to happen. So it's important to think of that when you think of the impact of suspensions and things, bannings and things like that. It's really important to the fans who have invested money in things, and you turn your pluppy Rogue jersey around for us real fast. I mean, that's a real life thing that happens. And trading, it's unavoidable, but things like this, it is avoidable, and it takes a responsibility from the players. And now there's an example out there, and people should know not to mess around with it.
Yeah, definitely. Shame on Dafran, good on Blizzard, good on Selfless. Let's just keep it clean. I mean, seriously, you don't need to be that. You don't need to do that. So, but I think that's gonna be just about it for this one, Death. Anything? Any last minute stuff?
Well, we do have one piece of housekeeping here, as we do have an iTunes review this week. So from Dazzle167 gave us a 5-star review titled Best In-Depth Analysis. High Noon is a great podcast for in-depth analysis on the esport tournament scene for Overwatch. I would like to see an in-depth discussion correlating pro strategies with regular competitive meta more often. Overall, the show is insightful and would highly recommend it to others. Thank you so much, Dazzle. Do me a favor. Can you tweet at me so that we can maybe have a DM conversation a little bit? I just want some more specifics about what you're referring to when you say that. We're always looking for content ideas, ways you think we can improve the show, segments that the listeners and the viewers want to see and hear. So please reach out. You can tweet at me directly at D3ATHBL0W or at High Noon Podcast or at The Blevins on Twitter as well. Any of us, let us know. We'll get into a conversation. We're very curious about what exactly you mean there. If we don't hear from you, we will just internalize it and do our best to bring that out in the future. But I'd love to just get a little more in-depth insight about what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have an idea, but we will talk about that on a later episode. Oh, one other piece of housekeeping. One of our listeners asked about getting the episodes on Google Play. Doesn't want to necessarily download iTunes on their phone, wants to listen on their Android device, what I will say is I have an Android. I have a Google Pixel, which runs on Android. I use an app called Podcast Addict, which I believe pulls podcasts from iTunes and from Stitcher and from all the podcast-iverse. I know for a fact High Noon Podcast is on there, but we don't specifically put it on Podcast Addict, so I don't know exactly where it pulls. I'm assuming it's from iTunes, but you download Podcast Addict, search for High Noon Podcast. It will be there. It will download it appropriately, and you can also listen to any other podcasts, as far as I know, on there as well. So you don't.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. Also, Stitcher works great on Android. That's how I listen to my podcast. So in the meantime, while we work on getting it up there, definitely feel free to check it out on those other platforms, as it is definitely currently available on the Android platform for you.
Yep, for sure. But guys, that is going to be it. Huge thanks to all the listeners, as always. All the patrons, you can always head on over to patreon.com/High Noon Podcast. Support the show. Get in the patron-only Discord, where we talk about all sorts of competitive stuff. Our basically resident reporter out on the field, A. Smith, and all the other guys in there, always throwing us stuff. There's always some good discussions as well, and some antics and some memeage as well. Guys, also remember to check out the Overwatch Today podcast. We were on their most recent episode, so at the very least, you're good to hear our stupid voices again. But definitely a good podcast with Big Fish and Croak. And also, don't forget to check out the Omnic Lab interview with Scott Mercer. I'm super proud of them. That's awesome. Friends of the show, Omnic Lab. I'm just jealous
enough about it to really punish him in our scrim tonight. So I'm coming for you. I'm gunning for you, man. Don't worry, he'll be gunning for me.
Yeah, well, their whole team is trying to get you, so
yes,
which is awesome. But
although we're throwing some spice at him today,
ooh,
we're gonna roll out the one healer composition that puts me on Sombra, I think, tonight in our scrim. So we will see exactly how that works out.
Spice. And
I'm
have
sure
me play.
I'm sure it's going to go poorly.
It'll definitely go poorly for someone. But guys, remember, you can always check us out. All the links to everything, iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, etc., etc., etc. All our personal stuff is over at highnoonpodcast.com. You can always tweet us at High Noon Podcast. All of our specific links and stuff are on that website. Yeah. Any last second stuff, Death?
No, I'll do the next last thing you always say, but thank you very much to Matt Giorino, the season 1 partners, and Adam Hoek for the outro that you're about to listen to. I don't know if you said that already, because I was reading something, but we said it twice if you
nope,
did.
It was once. You got it there.
All right, good. Perfect.
But there's only one last thing, Death, to remember. It's High Noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. Threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time, till I find mine.
Laziest thing at the end of